Hello, thank you for joining us today on Christ, Culture, and Coffee, and we are back this week with another episode for you guys. I'm your host, Tyler Hurley, here with Robbie Lashua.
Yes, I'm here, and I'm ready, and I'm caffeinated.
Caffeinated.
I've got my coffee. So I did want to be honest. I'm drinking an iced coffee drink in this coffee mug.
Oh, okay,
but it looks better for the video if I have a mug, right?
It does,
so
I guess.
anyway.
Yeah. I just kept mine inside of my plastic cup, but this...
Well, you're authentic.
I'm authentic.
There you go.
I don't give you guys a filter of myself.
No.
I give you the real me. I drink out of plastic coffee
I just
cups,
want people to be envious of these mugs. I want people to want these mugs. So.
The mugs are awesome. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, that is true.
Anyway, well, we're glad to be here today. We're going to be talking about the Texas heartbeat bill that got passed. We're going to be talking about the Satanic Church. We're going to be talking about personhood, and we're going to be talking about abortion.
Yeah.
It's going to be a good show.
It's going to be a great show. We have a lot in store for you guys today, but before we get into that, we're going to talk about coffee like we do every single week.
Yeah, so this is what I was wanting to do, and I think we're going to gain some really strong support, and then I think we're going to also make a lot of people upset and hate us for this.
Sure, yeah.
But I wanted us to talk about our opinions on the pumpkin spice craze.
Okay, yeah.
So Tyler, you go first. What do you think about, what's your opinion of, every time this fall, like they got pumpkin spice everything, man.
Okay.
They got toothpaste, they got coffee, they got
they
toilet
do,
paper. I mean, whatever, right? Everything's
the
pumpkin
toothpaste
spice.
one, that's weird if that's true. I believe it, though. But anyway, yeah. So, it's funny. I don't recall what your opinion is on this, but what I will say about my opinion, I really like pumpkin spice,
In coffee?
In everything. I'm serious.
Okay.
I'm a typical white girl. I got made fun of. It's true. I got made fun of by a good friend of mine who I very much respect. I was at school. This was a couple of years ago at GCU. I was sitting outside of Einstein's, right? He still brings this up to me like every fall or whenever I see him and stuff. He sees me. He walks by, and I kid you not, I have a pumpkin spice latte from Einstein's, of course, with a pumpkin bagel with pumpkin schmear.
Oh, nice.
It's all pumpkin, and I was very involved in it.
Were you wearing an orange shirt or
I
anything?
did. I was wearing a nice little sweater, right?
Oh my gosh. Scarf.
Yeah, exactly, a scarf. So, that's the thing for me. It's I don't know. It's a flavor that is exclusive to this time of year. I mean, I know you can get it the year round, but it's kind of like, how around Christmas, like you taste peppermint and things like that.
Yeah, sure.
For me, it reminds me of, wow, like it's fall, Halloween, and then eventually Thanksgiving coming up, like a new season.
Well, most of our listeners won't understand this because we live in Phoenix, so there aren't any seasons.
That's true.
We need something to mark out the seasons,
that's exactly
right?
it. So I'm glad you clarified that. Yeah, because here it's still in the hundreds, obviously, and it's going to be like
fall,
that for the rest
so we can
of the
drink
month.
Pumpkin spice.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's great.
The trees still look the same. They're all dead.
They're all dead. Everything's still brown.
Really,
yep.
Yeah, but still,
true.
so that is my opinion of pumpkin spice. I love it, and it's something that I've had for most of my coffee drinking life. So.
I like it. Yeah. So like my opinion of it is like I think it's fine in coffee. I don't know when the last time I had a pumpkin spice anything was. Like probably like 10 years ago, I was like, oh, pumpkin spice latte, this is good. But I think like I rebelled against it because everybody was so about it.
Because of the fad?
And I just don't want to go along with the crowd. Yeah, so I don't think it tastes bad. I think it tastes good, but I don't want to be a part of that. And so I like the flavor in the coffee, but I don't like the pumpkin spice.
It's not hipster
floss
enough for you.
Flavor.
Yeah.
I don't like the pumpkin spice everything. Yeah, I get tired of it. And the one thing that does give me a pet peeve, even about Christmas decorations or Halloween decorations, is like stores put it out so early. You know what I mean? It's like, Valentine's Day is over. Now it's time for Christmas stuff. It's like, what is going on here? And so I don't like when things come too soon because then it's not as special because you have it for a longer period of time. Of course. Right? And so that's kind of my opinion on it. I don't think it's bad. It's definitely not something I'll order.
You should try the pumpkin cold brew at Starbucks that they get usually. I don't know if they have it this year.
Maybe I'll try that. That sounds
I had
good.
that.
Okay.
I think they came out with it last year. For the first time, and it's really good. And I know you're a cold brew guy.
I am.
So you might like that.
The only thing I like doing with pumpkins is putting them in a potato gun and launching them Have you ever used a potato gun?
Yeah.
Oh man, we used to like build.
I've never done
them.
it with a pumpkin though.
Yeah, one of my friends built one when we were like in 6th grade, and he built it out of PVC, and it was like industrial, and we would put like ether into it as the combustible. Wow. I mean, it's not safe, but we'd stuff it after Halloween. We'd stuff it with all these old pieces of pumpkin. And it was awesome because we'd spray them down with ether, hairspray
like
first,
and everything too. You know?
Oh yeah, and
right?
then we'd light the thing, and it'd send out like this flaming pumpkin ball. It was awesome. So that's the kind of spice I like in my pumpkin.
That's pretty spicy.
It is.
Well, look at that. Well, now I've learned a little bit more about you.
Yeah,
and
there you
your
go.
Taste for pumpkin spice, or I guess lack thereof.
Lack of taste for it. Yep.
Look at that.
Anyway, well, let's get on to the topic of the day. So
yes,
this has been a huge week. This Texas abortion ban has gone into law.
Yeah,
this has been, I mean, I'm sure there's going to be litigation against it, but so far, this has been a huge win for the pro-life movement.
Yeah, it absolutely has. So for those of you who don't know, obviously, the details of this, we're going to go over that. But Texas has banned abortion in a bill that prohibits most abortions after a heartbeat can be detected, which is after 6 weeks. After 6 weeks.
Yeah, so virtually, a lot of people don't know they're pregnant up until that point.
They don't. So you can find out.
You can. Then. Yeah, you can.
And it's possible that they can still even get an abortion with this law. Like it's very possible.
If it's prior to 6 weeks. Yeah.
Yes. But this is a very clear law because it's not something that can be enforced by state officials, right? It can't be enforced by police or government.
Yeah, so this is where it's weird.
This is what's interesting, and I was very shocked.
So let's make sure we spell this out. So like
yes.
if somebody in Texas has an abortion after 6 weeks, it's not like a cop can go arrest
them.
No,
you can't go and arrest the abortion doctor.
They're not going to get thrown in prison.
You can't arrest the woman or the man involved. You can't arrest anybody.
The civil, the state officials can't enforce it
because.
So how does this work?
Exactly. So that's what they got into trouble with because they were thinking to themselves, how can we essentially remove abortion from the state up until this term without, because there would be a lot of legal issues if they had gone that route and tried to make it to where it was a law enforcement thing.
Yeah.
So what they did instead,
because the federal government has deemed it legal.
Exactly. Sure. So that's where it would be a problem. So what they did, and this is clever, the law is that it can be enforced by a private citizen bringing a civil lawsuit case against someone, whether it can be an abortion provider, someone who aided and abetting in having an abortion, or someone who forced a woman to have an abortion. And the lawsuit allows the individual who is suing that person involved to up to $10,000.
That's awesome.
In fines, basically.
So it's not even, so here's the thing. So it's not even like my girlfriend had an abortion against my will.
Nope.
It's anybody has an abortion, I can bring a lawsuit against them.
Exactly. So what this now does is it doesn't put anyone in jail. It doesn't, because what this does is it's lawsuit related. It gives people the legal right to sue over if someone has an abortion. But that's not even it. Anyone who's even like a third party not involved.
Yeah.
So like say that like a mother finds out that her daughter went in and had an abortion.
Yeah.
And it was supported and funded by her boyfriend and then the doctor. The mother who is not involved can even go in and say, well, look, that's not legal. And you shouldn't have done that.
Yep.
They can sue the abortionist doctor.
Yep. So this
effectively
effectively
else involved. Yeah.
puts abortion as a business out of business.
It does.
Because
exactly.
because every citizen of Texas has the ability to sue somebody who's had an abortion or who
was involved in it.
Who's involved in abortion. Yeah.
Exactly.
So it's
and
very
it
interesting.
incentivizes people to not go through with it because they'll be afraid. Wait, I could get sued here.
Yep.
So yeah.
Well, and so here's another interesting caveat to this whole thing is that the only way for an abortion provider to claim a defense against the application of this law. So if they want to protest this law, the only way that they can do that legally is they have to wait until a private citizen sues them.
Yeah.
And then once they go to court, they can raise their contrary argument, because this is where it's interesting. So like when laws get passed and people are really upset about it, they'll sue somebody or they'll bring a legal case against somebody.
Like the state or some legislator who produced the law.
Within this bill, they wrote that you can't sue the writers of this bill or anyone in the state because the state isn't enforcing it.
Yes, correct.
It's fascinating.
That's where this is an amazing legal loophole that they had found.
It's really smart.
It is.
Yeah,
yes.
and I like it because this reminds me of the scripture where Jesus says to be as shrewd as serpents but as innocent as doves.
Yeah.
And this is using the American law, going through the legal channels, but doing it in such a way where, like, the Supreme Court can't undo it.
Yeah, they can't.
And that's what was interesting. The Supreme Court, in a 5-4 vote, denied to stop this from passing.
Yes.
And so this is just an amazing, amazing win for the pro-life movement.
Yeah, exactly. And it's huge, of course, because the thing is about the goals of the pro-life movement are to make abortion illegal and unthinkable. We've talked about that plenty of times on this show. That's something that we are about. Like this is the goal to be nationwide, right? Not even 6 weeks. Like this should be just moment of conception.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how old a human being is. You shouldn't have the right to kill it.
No, absolutely not. But what this will do, though, even at the heartbeat bill, that significantly reduces it.
Oh,
and
man.
So
yeah, big time.
Majority of abortions cannot occur if there is a heartbeat bill in place.
In the state of Texas.
Yeah, exactly. So that is what's amazing here. So this is accomplishing the goal of the pro-life movement to where it's unthinkable. So it's not merely legal, it's also missional in that we want to convince people that killing a child in the womb is a horrendous evil, right?
Yeah, and that's where, because here's the thing, even if this was still legal, but most culture thought this was a horrible idea,
of course,
then we wouldn't do it. So our battle's on both fronts.
Yeah, of course it is. Because like you said, like this could be the law nationwide, but culturally, people might still be upset about it, and the cultural movement could still even be like, hey, no, this is bad. And we want to change people's minds, not just what the law is.
Yep.
Because that's significant here.
Exactly. And now when people say, well, you can't legislate morality, well, that's exactly what all laws are trying to do.
You're absolutely right.
Stopping at a red light is legislating morality.
Yes, it's subject. They're kind of reducing this to a subjective moral idea. Yeah. That's what they're trying to do with abortion. But getting on with the kind of this whole idea of what's going on in Texas. Obviously, like we said before, there would be some people who would want to countersue or get involved.
People are going to push back against it.
And they have been. That's been something that has been breaking my heart lately, is seeing just how crazy it is out there right now with the cultural movement against this. But one thing in particular that we wanted to shine some light on, just to bring awareness to this, is it's fascinating. The Satanic Temple is fighting this Texas heartbeat bill by claiming that their religious liberties are being taken away. Now, you might think, well, wait. What religious liberties, right? That's something that might be confusing. And now I've got some statements here from the founder of the Satanic Temple. And these statements are from fox7austin.com, published on September 7th. And his name is Lucian Greaves, okay? I believe I pronounced that correctly.
That sounds just like somebody who would start the Satanic
Temple.
It
does. Lucian sounds a lot Greaves. Like Lucifer a little bit. So I'm just saying, okay? Anyway.
If your name's Lucian out there, we're sorry.
Yeah. Anyway, this is a quote from the founder of the Satanic Temple. He said, "We really feel that the freedom of choice is something that belongs to a religious membership, and they should be able to, on religious liberty grounds, maintain it." Right? So the Satanic Temple recently sent a letter to the FDA asking for the church to be allowed to access the abortion-inducing drug for its rituals. Meaning, what they were doing is they're saying that, because it actually is in a lot of satanic doctrine.
Yeah.
Abortion is ritualistic to them. They believe that it is a part of their sacrament. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to make a case to the government and to the state of Texas specifically in saying that it is their right as a religious freedom to do this.
Well, and this is interesting. So the Satanic Temple isn't the same organization as the Satanic Church.
Yes, and that's an important thing to
the Satanic Temple, they're really an interesting group because they don't believe in like the supernatural. They don't worship Satan as an entity. They say he's more of an idea of standing defiantly against tyranny in all shapes and forms. However, They think that as part of their religion, which is science-based and freedom choice-based,
anti-religion basically which that's not really a thing, but that's what they call
but
it.
They're basically saying we want to allow for abortions.
Exactly.
And so here's a couple of things that I think are interesting. Is one, that it's not illegal to have an abortion until after 6 weeks.
Correct.
And I think it should be illegal always.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you are that bent out of shape, as the Satanic Church, why can't you have abortions before 6 weeks? Why, as part of your rituals, are people not taking the morning after pill at every gathering? Do you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So, like, what exactly are they pushing for? Like, no, we want the fetus to be more developed so that it looks more like a human being when it comes out. Like, what are they pushing for? I don't understand it.
That's exactly what you would wonder. And so, if TST is allowed access to the abortion drug, meaning TST, the Satanic Temple, any woman can request access to it. That's what they're trying to get at.
So they'll let anybody. Well, but there's a caveat to this, which is fascinating. Right, so they're like, we'll let any woman come and have an abortion under our umbrella of religious liberty. But there's a catch.
They have to declare themselves as a part of the Satanic Temple.
There it is. And there it is.
So,
bingo.
So basically, you don't, just throw everything you believe away and just renounce yourself to Satan.
Think about
essentially, and then you can kill your baby. That's
what
how
they're pushing for is, if you want to have abortions legally in Texas, you got to join the Satanic Temple.
Right.
So this is what I'm thinking. I'm thinking this is actually going to help the pro-life movement.
It absolutely is.
No, because you
got to think about this, right? And look, this is just, of course, this is just a speculation thing here, but it just makes sense. It's common sense. If there is a literal activist group out there that literally has their devotion essentially to Satan. Mm-hmm.
Or at least to atheism.
Yeah, atheism. Because
basically they believe they're gods, right?
Exactly.
They're gods,
but by them putting Satanic in their name, that's what they're implying, of course. Even though that's not what they say they stand for. It's on their name. Sure. That's the thing. So, like, by them doing that, they're literally pushing to the public out there and saying, look, you become a part of the Satanic Temple. Mm-hmm. And you can have an abortion. That just tells people, because people, even like secularists, will believe and understand to some degree, it's probably bad to like literally worship the devil. Because some people have a concept like, hey, we're like, the Satanic movement is bad.
Yeah, that's not something I really want to be a part of.
No one wants to be a part of that, really. So this is kind of like an interesting thing, in which will counter, and like Robbie was saying, I think it will help the pro-life movement because it kind of gives them a bad PR. It does.
It does. So I think it'll help. And one thing I saw him say too was that this law being passed is akin to making wine illegal, and how the illegality of wine would make the Roman Catholic Church Lord's Supper not function. That's what he said.
I did not hear that.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And so I was thinking about that, and I was like, okay, but what is being accomplished through the use of abortion? Like, that's what scared me a little.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so having wine in order to have communion, or the Eucharist, having an abortion in order to what?
To complete their ritual, I guess.
What's the ritual is what I want to know.
The real ritual is killing life. That's what it is.
Well, and I've heard some horror stories from the Satanic Church and things that warlocks do and things like that.
Correct.
And it's just
But what is the temple's goal? That's what you would wonder.
That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I don't know, and I haven't looked into it. But
because that's the thing, and this is where it's interesting, right? Yeah. This is something else to think about. Obviously, those are two different things entirely. Mm-hmm. I think, personally, because if you're thinking about it from a legal standpoint, I see what they're trying to do. They're trying to say, by legally outlawing wine, right, you can't perform communion.
Yeah.
So in the same way, by legally outlawing abortion, you can't perform their sacrament. Whatever that goal may be.
Yeah,
whatever say that there is a concrete goal that we have not fully looked into with their goal.
Yeah.
Whatever it may be, it really stems down to is your value and what you define as the unborn. It really does. And what we define them as a society.
Yeah.
Because sure, the difference here, though, if the unborn was not a human being at the moment of conception, and this is just anything, then it's no different from outlawing wine.
Yep.
And it should be legal because, you're preventing someone's religious.
You're preventing them from doing something they want to do.
Sure.
But we still have all of these laws about murder.
And that's exactly the case.
Yeah, and so that again gets down to the distinction, and we've had so many shows on abortion in the past, but it really gets down to the distinction of what is the unborn, and that is the question that needs to be asked, because they're obviously not believing that it's a person, and we're going to talk about their view of what the unborn is in a little bit. But I want to talk about how we got here. So this is interesting. There's this thing out there called personhood theory. And the idea is that a baby in the womb has to earn the status of personhood by achieving certain levels of cognition or certain levels of function or certain capacities or certain self-awareness or certain autonomy, that the baby isn't a person until it achieves certain goals. All right. And so for a long time, the pro-life movement has been pushing this belief, which I think is true, it's provable, that from the moment of conception, it's a human being.
Yes.
And really what that's been arguing against is it's not just a clump of cells, it's a human being from the moment of conception.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is scientifically provable.
Mm-hmm.
It's completely true. What has happened is that the pro-abortion side has done a maneuver where they said, okay, we agree with you that scientifically it's a human being, but it is not a human person. Right?
Yeah.
That's the distinction that's being made. It is a human being, but it's not constitutionally protected because it is not a human person.
Yeah, so what do they mean by that? What's the difference between a human person and a human being?
Well, that's the question. That's the question. And so where did this idea come from? Because this is where it gets interesting. Where did the idea come from that the physical human being is able to be separated from the human person? And when does the human being become the human person?
Exactly.
Right? And so this idea of separating personhood comes from basically relativism being dominant in our culture and naturalism being dominant in our culture. Mm-hmm. So Christianity teaches a holistic view of human beings, right? That we are body and soul, that we are material and immaterial. Yeah. And that's what a human being is. We're not one without the other in who we are, right? Even the resurrection of our bodies is a vital aspect of our theology because a human being is body and soul.
Yeah.
And God's going to fix our souls and he's going to fix our bodies. And then in the eternity, they're going to be joined back together. So unlike that idea of human beings, our secular culture has this fragmented view of human beings. And so basically in a nutshell, what's happened through Western culture is this. Naturalism or atheism and then postmodernism, relativism have kind of meshed together in the minds of modern Western civilization. So Christianity's over here, and then there's the atheist naturalist who thinks that science is the way you can know everything. Mm-hmm. And then there's the postmodern relativist who thinks that when it comes to morality and religion, we can't know what's right or wrong because science is the only way to know what's right or wrong. And you can only do science to physical things.
Yeah.
And morality and religion aren't physical things. Therefore, nobody knows. Therefore, you can make up whatever you want.
And there's a lot of issues with that.
Well, a lot of issues. But that's in a nutshell, that's where we've come to, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So you have people, the majority, I think, of people in Western culture have gotten sucked into this two views, or sometimes people call it the fact-value split, where on one end of the table, they believe in science and the hard facts of empiricism and that what we can know with our five senses and is verifiable is true. But when it comes to the non-physical, the metaphysical part of reality, they think they can make up their own rules. They can choose to be who they want to be. And that is where we are living. So how this applies, we see this in a lot of ways with transgenderism, right? That your physical body doesn't mean that's who you are. on the inside because the relativism side trumps the fact naturalism side.
Of course.
When it comes to hookup culture, right? We've talked about this. I can use my body to sleep with whoever I want, but I don't have to emotionally get attached to them. My inner person doesn't. And there's a whole bunch of problems with this belief, but a lot of people are walking around with it. And so when it comes to abortion, what has happened is, okay, in the fact scientific realm, we know that the baby is a human being. It has human DNA. It's alive. It reacts to stimuli. It has human parents, so the law of biogenesis comes into play. All those things we've talked about before. It's provable that it's a human being. However, they will say it's not a human person. And that's because there's that split of the facts and then what we deem things to be when we want them to be, the relativism.
Yeah.
And so that's where we are living. And you can see this from so many different people's quotes about abortion, and they justify it based on this personhood argument.
Of course, yes.
All over the place.
Yeah, I mean, like, again.
So let's get back to the Satanic Temple.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
So in the same article we were reading, you got this quote by Lucian Greaves. What did he say is the reason for abortion?
Yeah, and he talks about personhood, like you just described. He says, for us, for personhood to be achieved and for those protections to be in effect, there needs to be some type of higher cognitive function, okay? So he set a standard. He's saying in order for like the unborn to actually be a person, in other words, to where we value them and shouldn't kill them, essentially is what he's saying, is when they have a higher cognitive function.
I love how he says some type of.
That's
very definitive.
It's very vague.
Come on.
Extremely vague. And that's where it becomes subjective, Robbie. That's where it's like, okay, it's up to the person individually to decide that, right?
Yep.
That's what it comes to. I'm also going to read a quote here. This is by Peter Singer. He's a Princeton ethicist.
Okay, think about what you just said. A Princeton ethicist.
Yeah, that's what's interesting
now,
here.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah, a Princeton ethicist. He says the concept of a person is distinct from that of a member of the species Homo sapiens, in that it is personhood, not species membership, that is most significant in determining when it is wrong to end a life.
Peter, think about that. Okay, now think about that. So it's not about belonging to the Homo sapiens species. It's about personhood. And you can end the life of a Homo sapiens species member as long as they haven't achieved personhood yet.
You know what's strange here, Robbie? And this is just like something I'm observing from that quote. He is implying, like, in order for this to be true, there is an implication here that there is some sort of spiritual aspect to human beings.
Dude, okay,
that has to be.
That's the craziest part of it, is a lot of atheists will say this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But then you say, okay, so when do they become a person? And they don't know. But yeah, there's some kind of metaphysical, meaning non-physical, non-objective criteria. It really...
Off of what he said, there has to be.
Well, and practically it comes down to whenever I think it's a person, it's a person.
Yeah, but that's not what he said.
That's what it comes down to. No,
exactly.
It's not. But he gives... But here's the thing. All of these guys, they don't give any definitive criteria on when a human being becomes a person. But this is what was crazy to me, is this personhood theory, horrible ideology, got smuggled into this debate by the Roe v. Wade decision. So I want to read to you a quote from Justice Harry Blackmun, and he cemented this personhood theory into American law. This is so horrendous. So in the Roe v. Wade decision, he says, quote, "The word person, as used in the 14th Amendment, does not include the unborn. If the suggestion of personhood is established, the fetus's right to life would then be guaranteed." So he just claims that there aren't persons. A fetus isn't a person, right? That's what he says. The word person is used in the 14th Amendment, does not include the unborn. Why? Where do you get that from? He just says it. They're not a person yet. But then he says, if we could establish that they are persons, then the 14th Amendment would guarantee
so
the
that's
right to
why
life.
all these other people are coming out and making a distinction between personhood, because they're trying to get around that law and say, look, it can be human being.
And since 1973, with technological advancements and scientific advancements and medical advancements, we know that the baby from the moment of conception is a human
and that's like a scientifically undisputable fact. It just is, and that's something that people try to work around. But the unborn is a human being at the moment of conception.
But what this is saying, Tyler, is that being biologically human no longer warrants any moral status, any legal protection, any rights, because you're a human being. You have to attain something else. And now, again, this gets scary because that sounds like what Hitler was saying. The mentally handicapped, the disabled, the Jew, they're not on the same level as the rest of us.
All it does is
subjective.
When you dehumanize human beings, all it takes is to remove them of their personhood like that. That's what it's happened all throughout history. That's how. That's what a lot of racists today think. They think that like lesser, right? Yeah.
American slavery.
Yeah, that too.
Right. I mean, there's all the Samaritans and the Jews clashing. I mean, there's always been these things.
Yeah, there's always this idea of a lesser personhood, right? Yep. And that's what's happening here. As soon as we start to mess with that.
Well, and that's where the debate of abortion is today. So it's awesome when we say that life begins at the moment of conception. Most people agree with that now, but they say, but that life isn't a human person yet. It's just a human being.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the case here, right? So in order to support abortion, a person needs to believe that the human fetus is of such low value that killing it is inconsequential, but that this same unimportant human being somehow transforms into a human person that has such great value and worth that killing them will be murder. So where is the line? And then not only that,
I know, when does that take place? Nobody knows.
You even see what's baffles me to this day is that even in our laws today, that if a pregnant woman is killed, it's considered a double homicide.
Yeah, but if she decides to kill it, then it wasn't a human being.
Exactly. It makes no sense. There's no logic to it.
No,
there's not. It's very subjective, and it's just them basically saying we can just do whatever we want.
Yeah,
that's all there is to it. Personhood theory, though, has a huge issue because no one agrees on how to define personhood. Right?
Yeah,
that's the biggest issue here. If personhood is not equated with being a biological human being, then what is it and when does it begin? Right? And then that is actually something that the law in Roe v. Wade, the quote earlier, he said, if the suggestion of personhood is established, right? That's what he said. Meaning that if you could present a legal case that the unborn are a human being at the moment of conception with a person at the moment of conception, by that definition, they have the right to life, guaranteed, according to that law.
According to the 14th Amendment,
And that's what should happen.
But here's how it's working, though. Mm-hmm. So we've got the fetus. We can do the science on it. We know it's a human being.
Right.
But I subjectively still want to kill it. So I'm going to deem that it's not a person yet.
There you go. That's what they do.
And then when you ask, well, what is the criteria for personhood? Some people say, well, they got to be at this level of cognition. Well, they have to be able to function outside the womb. Well, they have to be.
Is why.
And they're all these subjective things. You say, number one, where are you getting that from? Mm-hmm. You're just making that up. And number two, I can give you example after example after example of people who are outside the womb who fail your criteria of being a human person. So now we're at the place where if you're mentally handicapped, you're not a human person.
Yeah.
You're physically handicapped, you're not a human person.
Well, that's actually another point.
It's so scary.
If you see the danger in that, if we continue to pass laws and legislation that define personhood, and if it falls under that category, people who are living would qualify as not being a person if they don't fall under that criteria.
So many people, and racism is horrendous, and the American slave trade was awful, unthinkable, completely against God's word. But what were the people then doing? They were deeming a certain group of people less than human or not as much of a person as me based on skin color. Now we're doing the exact same thing based on your level of development.
It absolutely is.
It's insane. It's insanity.
Yeah.
And so this is where we're at with this debate. And so I did want to clarify the personhood thing because we can prove that they're human beings.
Of course.
That fight's over. We've won. But now it's moved to, well, they're a human being, but they're not a human person.
Exactly. And that's the thing. And then that is where the focus needs to be at, right?
It has to be. So I want to read this quote to you guys from Nancy Pearcey. She wrote a phenomenal book called Love Thy Body. You need to go buy it and read it. This is what she says on page 84 of that book. When the concept of personhood is detached from biology, it becomes arbitrary with no objective criteria. Eventually, the definition of a person will be enforced by whichever group has the most power, using the instrumentalities of the state. If an unborn baby is not a person, what about children already born? What about people with disabilities, people who are terminally ill, the mentally ill, the elderly? This is a good quote from Nancy Pearcey.
Of course it is, yeah.
And she's right. When you
That's
detach personhood from biology, we are in a world of hurt because whoever's the strongest determines who's worthy of living and who's worthy of dying.
Yeah.
It's ultimate tyranny. It's ultimate terrorism. I mean, it's insane. Instead of that all men are created equal, not achieve equality, but are created equal because as a human being, we were made in God's image and likeness.
Yeah.
That's the Christian view. When we get away from that, then whoever has the power, like Pharaoh, throw all the baby boys into the Nile River.
Yeah.
What is any different about that? He's deeming who's significant and who's not, and he has the power to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where we're at right now. And so we got to think through this, and we do have a good tool that we've shared before on how to get your friends and family who are I'm not going to say pro-choice, pro-death, pro-abortion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thinking about these things. And so let's walk through this time-tested, amazing sled test that can help us with the personhood theory argument.
Yeah, of course. And so this is something that we've done an entire podcast on a couple times about this. So if you want an even further in-depth analysis on this, please look up our past pro-life series on the sled test. But we're going to give an overview of that right now because it's important that we cover this because it is such an issue going on right now, and it's something that we need to be aware of.
Yep, and need to know how to talk about, right?
And know how to talk about it with people.
So
exactly.
This is an easy way to remember how to talk to people.
Yeah.
About
So SLED is the acronym. Okay, SLED. Right. So that stands for size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency. Okay. Super easy to remember. SLED. Okay. That is what we're going after here. These 4 points focus on what gives a human being value and worth, right?
Personhood.
Exactly. Personhood. Not just saying, hey, they're a human being, but they're also a person by that law definition and by this weird legal debate that's going on right now.
Yep.
So starting off with the first letter, okay? Size, right? Does the fact that a fetus or zygote is extremely small make it non-human, right? Because I'm sure you probably have heard this. It says, well, they're so small, right? It's microscopic. Like, there's no way that that's a human being.
Even the morning after pill, right? Well, you won't even notice.
You won't even notice, right? Yeah, that's exactly what a lot of pro-abortionists use, this type of argument or this terminology, all sorts of arguments like that. Well, when you look at the SLED test and you think of size, right? Does the size of a person determine their value, right? I'm just saying, like, it makes sense that
you're taller than I am.
Yeah.
So are you more of a person?
Am I more of a person?
Or maybe I'm more of a person because I'm smaller.
What's the difference? Yeah, exactly.
Don't know.
Exactly. Is Shaquille O'Neal more human than I am because he is like 5 times my size? Maybe 6 times? I'm being a little generous.
Well, it's interesting to think about that. Like, how do you measure personhood? Is it based on physical size?
Exactly. That's the question, right? So that is the question. Are these professional athletes or anyone more or less valuable because they're bigger than the rest of the population? Or are infants, right? Like toddlers, newborn infants, or maybe a couple years or a couple months out the womb.
Yeah.
Are they less valuable than the rest of us because they are smaller than the rest of humanity? Right? So that's the question. Does size equal value? And I don't think it does. And no one thinks it does because it's just not true.
Yeah, nobody would say that for people outside of the
And that's
womb.
not even there's the Christian perspective of like where human beings get their value. But even on like a secular level, people understand, like that's not the case. Just because you're smaller than me or I'm bigger than you, vice versa, does not make you more or less a human being.
Well, now think about this a little bit.
Yeah.
Just because I'm bigger than you size-wise or more powerful than you doesn't mean you're not a human being.
Exactly.
But the very thing that we would all agree to when it comes to size is the thing that we're doing is you have a mother who's in a position of power over the baby in her womb.
Yes, of course.
And because she's in that position of power, she magically has a right to kill that human being.
And that's the case right now.
What would be the difference about, like some big NBA star, because they could physically harm littler people? We would say, come on, you can't do that because they're human beings with dignity and value and worth.
Of course.
But in the womb, it's no big deal.
There's zero difference. And if you think like we're reaching here, we're really not, because you have to follow these things out.
Yeah.
To their logical consistency.
Well, and that's where people will say, well, but they're not a human person yet. And then you can get to, when do they become a human person?
Exactly. So look at that. Now that moves on to the next part, Robbie.
Yeah. So we got size, level of development, environment, degree of dependency. So I'm going to talk about level of development. So does the fact that a baby in the womb is at a certain developmental stage of humanity make it non-human, non-person? All right. So is personhood based upon our abilities?
No.
It can't be.
No.
Because
of course
then
it can't.
Yeah, because then it depends on what abilities, it's all subjective, right? So the question I would ask people, and I have asked people, is are female toddlers who have not gone through puberty and can't reproduce not human persons like adult women? Mm-hmm. And everybody I've talked to would say, no, of course they're a human person, right? Of course they have value. Of course they have worth. Well, but they haven't developed to the level of being able to reproduce, right?
Yeah.
Are middle school boys less valuable because their brains haven't developed to the point where they can have abstract thought?
Yeah.
No, they're still a human person, but they're just at a certain level of development, right? And so now apply that to the baby in the womb. Well, listen, it's a baby the entire time. It doesn't become a human person at any point. It was a human person from the moment of conception, but it was at different stages of development, different levels of development.
It's all about consistency with this, right? And that's what the SLED test is trying to do. It's trying to bring out pro-abortion logic into its full philosophical consistency.
Yep.
And it exposes it.
Well, and that's where you go back to Lucian Greaves' statement when he said, for personhood to be achieved, there needs to be some type of higher cognitive function.
Right. So he didn't say what it was. He just said it was so vague.
Well, because you can't pinpoint what it is. But that's where he's getting at is they have to develop to a certain level.
Because I don't even think newborns have a very high cognitive function.
Well, that's the thing, man. They don't have autonomy either. Like I've heard sometimes people say, well, they have to, we'll get to that in a second.
Right.
I don't want to blow the last of these.
Right.
But level of development does not determine personhood. Living things change in level of development, but they don't change from one type of thing into a different kind of thing.
Of course
right?
not.
That's really important to think about. A giraffe was always a giraffe, right? Mm-hmm. Not just physically, but even in their mentality and in their decision making, they are. And it's the same with human beings, human persons. Living things don't change from one kind of being to another, but they do develop over time. They develop over time. And the slippery slope with level of development becomes, well, okay, what about when we start to lose certain cognitive abilities? What about people with dementia, Tyler?
Well, that is
Are they not, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's something that's talked about a lot. It's right. Level of development, right? If you were... it's even kind of just like other, not even just dementia patients, right? Mm-hmm. It's people who have other disabilities or missing limbs, right? Or things like that. Do you think that a combat soldier, a wounded veteran who
wounded
comes back,
physically, wounded mentally, right?
Yeah, they are people who are completely not missing these regular parts of the human body that allow them to function.
Yeah. Are they not a human person anymore?
Yeah, or are they less human than you and me because they are missing these things?
See, that's where it gets interesting. Is like, okay, so if you cut off my leg or my arm, did I lose part of my personhood?
No. And that's
because
where you start
are
to
a human being.
Yeah, what, and that also brings into like another argument of like what really is a person soul in general, because it's not the material, obviously, because if you're missing all that, you're still you. So it's
exactly.
But anyway, but still, for the argument in abortion, you can't say that an unborn is not a human being based off of what stage it's at in its development in the womb.
No, because we're all at different stages out of the womb. And so now we're determining what we can kill, what we can't.
And then just another thing with that too, I always go to premature children, right?
Sure.
Like premature, they were underdeveloped, right? But a lot of hospitals will like risk a lot in order to save their life. They'll go all in on trying to save a baby's life if it's wanted, apparently, versus someone who maybe like up until birth can be aborted in certain states.
Yep.
And so that's just the factor to consider there.
It's because there's such a crazy view of I get to determine when this person is valuable.
That's exactly what's going on.
And that is horrendous. We shouldn't do that. So size, level, development aren't good reasons to have an abortion. Let's go on to the next one.
Yes. So the next one is the E on the SLED test, right? Environment. Okay. So a fetus is located in a very specific environment, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Another, like a pro-abortion argument that you might hear that relates to this as well, they're not born, they're not actually a human being because they're not born yet. They're still in the womb, okay? Yeah. Anything inside the womb that's not actually a human person because they're not here. They're not with us, right?
But then they come out and they magically become a human person.
All of a sudden, you know, the magic of the birth canal, as they call it. So that is a pro-abortion argument that you hear a lot. But the thing that's very fascinating about this, if you play it out to its consistency, is that this does not, your environment does not make a difference on whether or not you are an unborn, like whether or not you are a human being. And it doesn't for the unborn. This is how you kind of trot that out. The question that you would ask is, does a person's location determine their value, right? Does a person in general location, does that determine if a person crosses an international border into another country, right?
Are they not a person?
Are they not a person, right? Or if they're in between. If you're in space, right? If you're in a different environment, if you're away from the rest of humanity, if you're like in an enclosed environment, are you not a person?
Yeah.
That's and like this seems interesting because you kind of or someone who scuba dives, right? You're in a completely different environment.
Well, you think about a baby in the womb; they're not breathing oxygen through their nose and lungs, right? So they're being assisted. Well, that scuba divers do that. What about all these people who are in the hospital with COVID that are on feeding tubes?
Right?
Isn't that very similar?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you see, so how can people argue? Well, depending on your environment, you are a person or you're not a person. It's crazy to think about.
That's exactly the issue there. And the thing is you tend to wonder why in some cases that a baby in the fetus in the same environment, two different babies can be given a different value placed on them dependent on whatever the subjectivity of the mother or people surrounding gives it.
Yeah.
So like
there's no objective test.
Exactly. That's the thing. One person can say, hey, my baby is my baby and I believe that they're a human and I want them to be born. I want my baby. So there you go. So that's where it becomes, okay, so you don't really believe that it's involving the environment that determines a person's human value. You really are just trying to make an excuse to subjectively say that I don't want my child. And so that's really what's going on here.
It is. Yeah. And these are the excuses made to basically say, this is inconvenient and I want to
It's a matter of convenience.
It is.
Absolutely.
So the last one in the SLED test is degree of dependency. So we had size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency. And so the idea is that some people say, well, when a person isn't viable, right, or like we read in that Peter Singer quote, they don't have a certain level of autonomy, then they aren't deemed a person yet. So if a person's not viable for survival, does that make them not a person?
Absolutely not.
No. So think about this. If you're dependent on someone or something else for your survival, are you not a person?
Every kid, up to I don't
Babies
know how old. Yeah.
aren't autonomous. Babies can't feed themselves, change themselves, burp themselves, roll over. I mean, so what's the difference between a 6-month-old and a baby in the womb when it comes to dependency?
Like 3 to 6 years old kids, they can't take.
What about
you have kids?
High school students? They're not dependent of their parents financially, but that doesn't mean they're not a human person.
Absolutely not.
It just means they're not developed to this independence yet. And the other thing is this: all of us are dependent on something. I'm pretty dependent on food. I'm pretty dependent on air.
Yeah.
I'm pretty dependent on water. The other thing is this: what about diabetics?
Oh, yeah.
They are literally dependent on insulin. So
Yeah.
the fact that they're dependent on insulin, does that mean they're not a human being?
That's a big deal. And these are the things that we need to be thinking about. Yeah.
What about pacemakers? I know a guy who had a pacemaker put in not too long ago. So his heart's
Depending
not
on-
working right. So is he not viable enough to be a human being because he's dependent on a pacemaker? What about people with artificial limbs? What about, I mean, you could go on. What about wheelchairs?
Yeah.
Isn't a wheelchair a dependency thing?
Right. Yeah. That's the thing.
And on and on. So people in these situations aren't less human persons than everyone else, right? So the argument that when there's a baby in the womb is not a person until they achieve this viability outside of the womb is just completely untrue. It's flawed logic.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
Yeah, I don't know any newborns who are sufficient to exist on their own and survive on their own, right? I don't know many junior hires who could exist on their own, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, all of these arguments are just so bad, but this is the stuff people have to make up when they are fighting and raging against reality.
Yeah,
and that's where we're at with the Satanic Church. That's where we're at with Peter Singer. That's where we're at with so many of these personhood theorists, because they don't want to give you a criteria for what deems a person a person. It really comes down to, I just want to make a choice to do what I want to do.
Yeah, and that's the thing that you got to realize with a lot of these people. And the crazy thing is, so we've actually, Robbie and I both have done this many times. We've had conversations with people about the sled test and things in relation to this, and people's minds are changed.
They are.
It's because there's a lot of people out there that just don't understand, that haven't been like walked through
haven't
this
thought
before.
through the logic.
Yeah, haven't thought it through. But so like either you just don't understand the personhood idea here that the unborn is a human being and person at the moment of conception based off of scientific facts and philosophical logic, right? Or you have to be consistent and just flat out say, look, I just don't care, right?
Yeah.
I'm okay with killing unborn human
But
persons.
nobody wants to say
but
that,
no one
right?
wants to.
Yeah, no one wants
exactly.
to. No, we dehumanize them so then we can do whatever atrocious things we want to do.
It's because
to
they
them.
know it's wrong. They understand that idea is wrong. So they will sometimes even lie to themselves and say, look, this is just going to be what I make this false reality out to be for my subjective idea that I think that I should be able to terminate my children whenever I want.
Yeah, and also, what betrays that fact is that nobody is making robust, I mean, I don't want to say robust because that means they're good. Nobody's making effort to argue in this way for root canals or for appendectomies or for gallbladder removal. So why do they have to argue and justify so much for killing a baby?
And that's
it's
the
because
difference,
it's
right?
not the same type of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And now that's the thing that you gotta remember. Obviously, like we don't have all the time in the world in this podcast to go over everything that's out there, but the sled test is very applicable to all these different pro-choice and pro-abortion arguments that you'll hear, because a lot of times what they'll even do is they'll deter the conversation away from what is the unborn, and they'll try to focus it on emotional factors, right?
Yeah.
They'll try to distract you from the conversation and say, well, what about the mother about this? Like the mother, she is going through so much. And honestly, a lot of women really are going through a lot, right?
Yep.
So what you do in that case, whatever the argument is, follow it through with the consistency. Is that hardship that the mother is going to have to go through carrying that baby to term worth killing another human being over? It's not.
It's not
certainly
in the
never
womb
is.
or outside of the
In
womb.
the womb or outside the womb.
And if you want more information on other tactics we have for abortion, go listen to our other podcasts on abortion where we talk about the trotting out the toddler, and we show how scientifically that babies are human beings. But today we did want to focus on personhood because that's really where the debate's at now with the Satanic Church. And with ethicists like Peter Singer. And we got to be prepared to talk with people about that because that's a maneuver they're going to use. Yeah, it's a human being, but I don't think it's a human person.
And this is especially important that if you're a Christian, you cannot be pro-abortion. You cannot be pro-choice. That is super unbiblical.
Yeah.
in so many ways.
It's very against what God says human beings
absolutely is. And so if you're a Christian and you are pro-choice or pro-abortion, please take some time to look over this and look over what Scripture says about human life, because this is very crucial as a believer to be understanding of where God stands on the position of this, right?
Yep.
And so, please, again, we've done other episodes on that as well, so please go back and look into that. But also, if you have any questions or anything at all related to the podcast or anything that was not discussed that you want a little bit more information on or have some dialogue with us, we are on social media. You can reach out to us on Instagram and send us a message that way. That's the best way to do it, or on Facebook or these other platforms.
All of the places. So,
yeah, you can even email us. We have emails.
Even that, yeah.
Exactly.
We'd love to hear from you. But hey, thanks so much for being with us today on Christ, Culture, and Coffee. Make sure you're going out and you're standing for life and you're helping people to understand that every human being is a human person, no matter location, no matter how small, no matter level of development, no matter how much they're dependent on other people. Every human being is also a human person, and we can't detach those two things from one another. Thanks so much for being with us today on Christ, Culture, and Coffee, and we will catch you guys next week.